It must be dreadful for them. I can't imagine what it must be like, and particularly after all these years.
Can you remember this area being searched at the time, 7 years ago?
No. Don't think it was even entered into it. I don't think it's ever been mentioned until very recently.
Among the group known as the Tapas 7, one name appears again and again in whispers, in testimony, and in the gaps of the timeline: Dr. David Payne. He was not a stranger wandering the resort, nor a convicted predator traced through criminal records. He was a close friend, a doctor, a holiday companion who dined with the McCanns night after night. But when the details of that evening are examined, contradictions surface, silences deepen, and the figure of David Payne steps from the background into the uneasy foreground of suspicion. This is not a simple story of disappearance. It is a mosaic of inconsistencies, of timelines that do not align, of physical evidence that points inward rather than outward, and of a silence, both personal and collective, that may have buried the truth. To understand what happened to Madeleine, we must follow those fragments, trace the shadows, and ask the questions that too often went unanswered. On the evening of May 3, 2007, hours before Madeleine vanished, David Payne described a seemingly harmless visit. At around 6:30 p.m., according to his testimony, he stopped by apartment 5A to check if Kate McCann needed anything while Jerry was away at a tennis game. Payne later claimed he stepped inside, saw Kate, and even observed Madeleine herself. He remembered her appearance with striking clarity: her pajamas, her calmness, her doll-like look. His description was oddly vivid, almost rehearsed, as if etched into his memory with unnatural precision. At first glance, nothing about this moment appears sinister. Friends often look in on each other during holidays, offering help with children or daily tasks. Yet the more this small encounter was examined, the more it became one of the most puzzling pieces in the investigation. Because while Payne insisted on that visit, Jerry's account contradicted it. Returning from tennis at roughly the same time, Jerry said he found Kate and the children inside the apartment, but made no mention of Payne being there. If Payne had truly just been present, how could Jerry overlook it? Kate's testimony added more confusion. In her earliest statements, she said nothing about David Payne visiting that evening. Only later did her version shift, acknowledging that he had indeed stopped by. For investigators, journalists, and the public, this discrepancy became a crack in the narrative. In a case where every detail was scrutinized, how could such an important moment be omitted, then belatedly remembered? The contradiction does more than raise questions about memory. It places Payne inside the McCann apartment at a critical time, potentially making him the last person outside the family to see Madeleine alive. Was he truly there, as he claimed? Or did he insert himself into the timeline for reasons only he knew? Conversely, if he was present, why did both McCanns initially fail to mention it? Oversight alone cannot easily explain such a gap, not when the stakes were so high and the details of that night so heavily examined. This clash of testimonies transformed a casual visit into a fault line in the investigation. Instead of clarifying the evening's events, it deepened the mystery, leaving behind a troubling sense that something about 6:30 p.m. did not add up. In every missing person case, there comes a window of time that becomes the fulcrum of truth. For Madeleine McCann, that window is the 55 minutes between 9:05 and 10:00 p.m. At 9:05, Jerry McCann returned briefly to apartment 5A. He checked on his children, reported that everything seemed fine, and went back to dinner with the group. By 10:00, Kate entered the same apartment and found the nightmare. Madeleine was gone, her bed empty, the shutter open. Those 55 minutes are the heart of the mystery, a span so short and yet long enough for everything to change. For most of the Tapas group, their movements during this time could be accounted for, either by one another or by staff who noticed their comings and goings. But David Payne's whereabouts? They dissolved into the night. No one clearly remembered seeing him. No overlapping testimony placed him in the restaurant or moving about the complex. Unlike others, whose steps could be retraced, Payne appeared to vanish from the map of that evening. When questioned later, he delivered an account that was almost too polished. He spoke of times, details, and impressions with such precision that some observers thought it sounded like a script, not the recollections of a man living through chaos. His words lacked the hesitations of memory. Instead, they carried the cadence of something practiced, something rehearsed to withstand interrogation. And yet, despite this troubling impression, his version of events was largely accepted. investigators did not aggressively test the contradictions. The vacuum of his location between 9:05 and 10:00 remained unexplored. Meanwhile, a witness known as Mrs. C recalled seeing a man acting nervously near the McCann apartment during that very time frame. She could not confirm it was Payne, but the coincidence of time and place deepened suspicion. This deadly hour was the last confirmed period when Madeleine was alive, and the first in which she was known to be gone. To be absent from verification during such a span is no minor gap, it is a chasm. And David Payne's unexplained disappearance into that chasm remains one of the most disturbing voids in the entire case. If memory and testimony can falter, physical evidence is often seen as the most reliable witness. And in the case of Madeleine McCann, the walls of apartment 5A held their own silent story. Months after her disappearance, British cadaver and blood detection dogs were brought into the holiday flat. Their reactions shocked investigators. Near the living room sofa, both dogs gave strong alerts, one signaling the scent of human decomposition, the other detecting traces of blood. This was not random. These dogs had built reputations for accuracy in countless other cases, rarely alerting without cause. Their signals suggested that something deeply unsettling had occurred in that very spot, in the heart of the McCann's apartment. Forensic teams quickly removed the sofa, swabbed the area, and collected fibers and residues for laboratory testing. What they found only added to the unease. Among the materials gathered were fibers that did not match the sofa upholstery, nor any furnishings inside the apartment. Instead, they appeared foreign, out of place. Analysts noted that their texture and weave seemed closer to clothing than to household fabric. Quietly, suspicions began to grow. Observers suggested that the fibers resembled garments worn by David Payne during the holiday. No DNA link was ever confirmed. The fibers could not conclusively tie Payne, or anyone else, to the forensic alerts near the sofa. Yet the combination was chilling: decomposition and blood signals in the exact area where strange, unexplained fibers were found. Coincidence, perhaps, but in the eyes of many, too sharp, too troubling to dismiss. When questioned about these findings, Payne denied any connection. But his demeanor betrayed something. He was not calm, logical, or clinical, as one might expect from a doctor trained to analyze evidence. Instead, he appeared nervous, evasive, visibly uncomfortable. Body language experts who later reviewed footage of his interviews pointed to stress signals, interpreting them as signs of unease rather than innocence. The sofa, the fibers, and the dog's alerts formed one of the most damning circumstantial links in the case. And yet, strangely, investigators did not pursue it with vigor. The evidence was noted, recorded, and then allowed to fade into the background of an already complex investigation. But for those who studied the case, the image remains vivid: a sofa marked by blood and death, and fibers that should not have been there, whispering of a truth never fully confronted. If fibers and scents hinted at hidden truths inside the apartment, David Payne's phone records painted an equally troubling picture outside of it. In 2007, mobile phones were already woven into daily life. Parents on holiday used them constantly to arrange dinners, check on children, or contact family back home. Members of the Tapas group showed normal activity: calls, texts, patterns consistent with busy days and shifting plans. Payne's records, however, told a different story. For the 24 hours surrounding Madeleine's disappearance, the most crucial window in the entire case, his phone went nearly silent. No outgoing or incoming activity of significance, no trace of ordinary use. Just one exception. On the afternoon of May 3rd, he made a single call lasting 3 minutes, reportedly from near the Ocean Club complex. When pressed later, Payne admitted to making the call, but claimed he could not remember who he had phoned or why. That answer alarmed investigators and critics alike. A 3-minute call is not a misdial, not a passing blip. It is long enough to convey information, arrange a meeting, or pass along instructions. To forget its content, especially in the wake of a child's disappearance, stretches credibility to breaking point. For many, Payne's inability, or unwillingness, to clarify this call raised the suspicion that he was hiding something. The silence around it was even more striking. Before and after that call, his phone records showed no meaningful activity for an entire day. In a group holiday setting, this absence was extraordinary. While others juggled childcare, dinner reservations, and social plans with frequent calls, Payne's phone stood out as an island of quiet. Was this coincidence, forgetfulness, or something more deliberate? An effort to avoid leaving a digital trail that could later expose his movements? When questioned, Payne appeared uneasy, defensive, and evasive. He offered no speculation, no plausible suggestion that it might have been a work colleague or relative. Instead, he left investigators with only silence, a silence that echoed the larger patterns surrounding him. In criminal investigations, the absence of communication can be as telling as the presence of it. And in Payne's case, his quiet phone became less an oversight and more a symbol. Another missing piece in a puzzle defined by gaps, contradictions, and unanswered questions. As suspicion swirled around David Payne, another figure remained curiously untouched by public scrutiny: his wife, Dr. Fiona Payne. Unlike Kate and Jerry McCann, who endured endless interviews, press conferences, and even formal suspicion, Fiona spoke little and avoided the spotlight. She did not contradict her husband's account, did not raise doubts, and never wavered from the group's collective version of events. Her silence was so complete that it became part of the story. Within the Tapas 7, investigators noticed a peculiar unity. Each member gave statements that overlapped neatly, smoothing out contradictions and filling in gaps just enough to preserve the credibility of the whole group. Critics began to describe this as a pact of silence. Not a formal agreement, but a tacit understanding that no one would break ranks. No one would point fingers, even when inconsistencies emerged. Together, their stories held. Fiona's role in this collective silence is difficult to ignore. She was present on the holiday, aware of shifting accounts and crucial timelines. She would have known whether David truly visited apartment 5A at 6:30 p.m. She would have noticed his absence during the deadly hour between 9:05 and 10 p.m. She would have overheard the whispered conversations in the immediate aftermath of Madeleine's disappearance. As a mother herself, she would have seen signs if something in David's behavior was amiss. Yet, she never voiced alarm, never hinted at doubt. Why? Some argue it was loyalty, protecting her husband and her family from suspicion. Others suggest it was more than loyalty, that Fiona may have actively participated in maintaining the group's coordinated testimony. Her silence, whether passive or deliberate, was powerful. As another parent, her refusal to raise concerns about David effectively shielded him from deeper scrutiny. If she trusted him, why should outsiders not do the same? The psychology of group secrecy offers one explanation. Once a group commits to a shared version of events, breaking it becomes almost impossible. To contradict David would have risked unraveling the entire story, exposing not just him, but Fiona herself to suspicion. In this way, her silence became not just protective, but self-preserving. The idea of a pact of silence has haunted the case ever since. It suggests that what happened that night may not only have been hidden by one man, but guarded by a group unwilling to fracture. Fiona Payne's unwavering quietness is part of that shield, a shield that may have ensured the truth never surfaced. 17 years on, the disappearance of Madeleine McCann remains one of the most infamous unsolved cases in the world. Theories have shifted from abduction by a stranger to suspicion of the parents to the more recent focus on convicted offender Christian Bruckner. Yet through all these changes, one set of anomalies, those surrounding David and Fiona Payne, was never fully resolved. David's testimony about his 6:30 p.m. visit clashed with Jerry's account and was only later supported by Kate. His whereabouts between 9:05 and 10 p.m., the very hour Madeleine vanished, were never confirmed. Cadaver and blood dogs alerted to the sofa, where foreign fibers were found that some thought resembled his clothing. His phone went silent for 24 hours, broken only by a mysterious 3-minute call he could not explain. His demeanor when questioned betrayed unease rather than confidence. And through it all, Fiona remained silent, reinforcing the group's unity, never contradicting him, never breaking ranks. Individually, each of these anomalies might be explained away. Collectively, they form a troubling pattern, a pattern that points inward, not outward, and suggests that the greatest danger may not have come from a stranger lurking in the night, but from someone within the circle of trust. Yet investigators never pulled hard on those threads. Whether out of lack of evidence, institutional reluctance, or fear of shattering the narrative, they let them fade into the background. The result is a case defined as much by silence as by evidence. A silence from friends who never broke loyalty, from authorities who avoided confrontation, from media who rarely pressed the question, and from Fiona herself, whose refusal to speak may have shielded her husband from the scrutiny others endured. In this silence, the truth was not only hidden, it was protected. Madeleine's story is unfinished. Her disappearance is not just the tragedy of a child lost, but of a truth buried. It reminds us that silence is not absence, it is a choice. And when silence protects the wrong people, justice falters, and the innocent remain lost in both life and memory. Until the questions surrounding David and Fiona Payne are confronted with the urgency they deserve, the case will remain not only a mystery of what happened to Madeleine McCann, but a story of how the truth itself can vanish into shadows.